You got a PlayStation 2?
Nah, I got Gamecast.
Gamecast?
Okay.
Honey Buckle sucks.
That's fucking insane.
That's a lot of dead weed.
Mamma mia!
Open your mouth again and you'll be singing falsetto permanently.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of TDub's Gamecast. I'm your host, TDub, here to bring you another podcast of me talking about video games. But before we get to that, I gotta thank all of our patrons over at patreon.com/TWKReviews. Those people being Bobber Castaneda, Ricky Relic, and Casey Nicholas Moore. Thank you so much for contributing to the show. And today we're going to be talking about the Nintendo 64, my journey through this glorious console. But before we get to that, we gotta get to the music. But I have to add a little caveat here because, as you can tell, this is now being broadcasted on YouTube, which means I have to be a bit more careful as to what music I use. Now, there are various reasons why I'm switching up from Podomatic to the YouTubes, and that is mainly due to the fact that, really, I don't feel like paying for the Pro program to have unlimited space up there. That, and I think I'll get a much wider reach here on YouTube, and I think it'll also do wonders for this channel. At least I am hoping that it does. So let's all join in and listen to some amazing Nintendo 64 music as we transition into our main discussion. Yeah, that's some good music, huh? Alrighty then, alright. First up, we have the fact that before I had an N64, you know what I had? Do you know what I had? I had a Sega Genesis. Yeah, that was quite the console, just filled to the brim with 2D platformers. And even as a young child, those could only fill my love for video games so much. Back then when I was just a wee little lad playing those 2D platformers, I was like, video games are fine, I suppose. But then, one day, at around 5 years old, I was at my second cousin's house, and they had this Nintendo 64 console, and what did they have playing at the time? Super Mario 64! And my mind was blown as to what video games could possibly do, because, like, before that, it was just all 2D images, like cartoons, essentially, but now I was seeing this super realistic at the time graphics with Mario jumping into paintings, and it just absolutely blew my mind. And so when I asked my dad to go rent that for me, about a year later, it turns out he accidentally got me a Super Nintendo with Mario RPG. However, that's a story for another time, but that did make me appreciate RPGs, even though my young mind didn't comprehend what RPGs were when I was 6 years old. Let's see, I was 6 years old in kindergarten, so yeah, clearly not even able to properly process RPGs, stats, how turns properly work, so it's kind of amazing how far I got when I was 6 years old thinking about it in Super Mario RPG, because I got all the way up to, let's see, what was that boss? Fuck. I'm trying to remember it, but it's the one that steals a whole bunch of stuff from the first town. It's like the alligator. Why can't I remember this? I was just watching a Let's Play of this not too long ago. How do I forget this stuff so easily? Oh, the pressures of podcasting, everyone. Nevertheless, my first true introduction to the Nintendo 64 as I have it, and I still own my original Nintendo 64 with the original controller it came with the game. It was a jungle green one. I got it in December of 1999 for Christmas. That's right, Donkey Kong 64. That was my one true blue ironically, guess I should say True Green, introduction to the Nintendo 64, Donkey Kong 64. I know a lot of people are going to moan and groan because they hate that game. They think it's the worst thing to ever happen to Donkey Kong. And oh, that's so tedious going through all of these hoops to get these collectibles. Why couldn't it be like Banjo where you just walk up and get it? You have to constantly switch to different Kongs, yada, yada, yada. And there's so many things to collect to complete it. But here's the thing, whether I was a child or here as a fully grown adult, I don't give a fuck about completing bullshit. I don't give a fuck. God, that's the worst thing I've ever done, which is saying something because I am not the best singer in the world. So that was below par even for me. So let's give that one more time. Let's try that one more time. I don't give a fuck. Better, but not perfect. But to spare your ears, we will move on. I do not care about completing. I'll play as much of a game as I please, as much as fills my heart and soul with goodness, and then I decide to move on. And I think that also just allows me to always go back and see something new in the game, because if I were to complete a game, then there's just not much left to do unless I just feel like completing it again. And I have completed games before, and I believe I've talked about this in previous episodes of the podcast, but I've completed Arkham Asylum, I've completed Arkham City, although I don't count getting trophies as completing, although I am close to doing that with Mass Effect 1 and 2 on PS4, so yay for that. Let's see here. I've completed Mystical Ninja starring Goemon. I've completed Goemon's Great Adventure. I've completed Jak and Daxter back in the day, but I still haven't done that on PlayStation 4. Might have to do that one day just for the sake of getting that over with. I'm trying to think of other games I have completed. I don't really count wrestling games because if you want, I have completed some of those, which just means you got all the unlockables, which isn't hard. You just have to play through the season mode like 2 or 3 times, and then you eventually get enough in-game money to just unlock everything. So I think wrestling games might be the easiest thing ever to complete. In fact, maybe sports games in general, if they operate under that principle. I've never completed any of the Tony Hawk games because that requires you to get every single gap, and just not my thing. Anyways, I love Donkey Kong 64. I loved it as a kid, and I love it now because it's just a really fun collectathon. Yes, there's a lot of stuff to collect, but if you don't focus on just completing it, if you focus on just, okay, let's see what I can get as Donkey Kong, just get all the stuff there, then switch over to Diddy, get all that stuff, and you just make sure to just keep the cycle going, and you just collect whatever you want to collect, and you just move on to the next level, and you don't worry about completing it. I think you're going to have a much better time. If you don't look at these games from a completionist point of view, I think you're going to have a great time. However, I do have some friends that are completionists, and I can understand their frustration with the pacing of the game, because if you are that, then I can so understand that. And that's also why I prefer Banjo-Tooie to Kazooie, because Tooie is not meant to accommodate completionists. No. It is much more for the casual gamer. And I feel like those are like two mindsets that are constantly competing with each other. I actually got into Tooie before Kazooie because while I remember playing Kazooie at my best friend Mike's house a couple of times, Tooie was the first one I got to really sink my teeth into when my dad rented it for me one day from Blockbuster. And just in case there's one or two of you listening that don't remember what Blockbuster is, it was the store where you go and you rent stuff, like Netflix, except it's not streaming and you just take it home. And then eventually, 3 to 7 days later, you have to take it back or else you'll have to pay late fees. And oh boy, would my parents get mad at me if I forgot to return stuff. Ooh, yeah, you gotta make sure of that stuff. So yeah, I have a lot of fun with the collectathon games, which were a dime a dozen on the N64. There were so many collectathons and 3D platformers, some clearly better than others, but you have to remember, this is the first 3D console. Yeah, PS1 was kind of 3D, had some 3D games, but when you actually look at a lot of PlayStation 1 games, they were quote-unquote 3D because they would have 3D character models, but they would be placed on a 2D background. So essentially, it's the equivalent of chroma keying. It's the difference between shooting on a set with a green screen and actually being on location. That's really the two biggest things you can differentiate between the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation 1. Now, the N64 did do that a couple of times, but it was far less common. Like, thinking about it, Ocarina of Time's the only game that I can think of off the top of my head that did that on the N64. I'm looking through the games I've listed that I played, and I just can't think of too many other games that really did that. I mean, when it comes to actual controlling stuff, yeah, like, whenever you had, like, character models on display, like, in a special mode, they probably did the whole chroma keying gimmick, but Ocarina of Time's the only one I can think of off the top of my head that did the whole, actually walking around a building and it's actually 2D. One thing that I always loved the Nintendo 64 for is the fact that it was my multiplayer console. Yeah, I had some multiplayer fun on the PS2 and the 360 and the GameCube, but no console was really, for me and my friends, built for multiplayer like the Nintendo 64, because right off the bat, 4 controller ports. I'm looking straight at it right now, 4 controller ports right off the bat, and really no other console was doing that at the time. PlayStation both 1 and 2 only had 2 controller ports. Like the PlayStation 1, I can understand because, that 4 ports, that's just weird, but the PS2 still only had 2 and you had to get an expansion gimmick for that? Come on! What are you doing? What are you doing, Sony? This is why, me and my friends, whenever we play multiplayer, 9 times out of 10, it was a Nintendo console. First it was N64, then later on with the GameCube, because GameCube also had 4 controller ports, because they knew couch multiplayer, that's where it is at. And when the 360 came out, that could also support 4 controllers natively. Didn't need any expansion gimmicks at all. That's the way he did it. Never played PS3, but I would hope by that point they would master that. But I don't know. For all I know, PS3 is like, only 2-player couch support. Mobby. And if that's the case, then, Sony. No wonder you lost that console for so long. You gotta get the couch multiplayer, man. Get that local multiplayer. And there's just nothing that can replicate just being next to someone, playing something like Mario Party, and just stealing the star away from them as they give you the biggest death glare you've ever felt in your entire life. But of course, now people are going to experience that all over again with the new Mario Party series. Like, got the new Mario Party, and then you got the sort of tribute to the past Mario Parties that's called Mario Party Superstars. And people were now able to even play that online. Man. Ooh. But there's it's one thing to do that online, but it's just, if someone's next to you, that adds a whole nother pressure to you, because you're like, if I steal a star or 2 from this person, are they going to get up out of their seat and murder me? There's always that risk that you have to run. But if somebody is like 10,000 miles away, other side of the planet, and you steal a star from them, they're not going to do anything to you. They're not going to show up at your house tomorrow morning. That's crazy. They're not going to do that. You don't have to worry about that. But if someone's staying next to you, you're like, gotta weigh my options here. Gotta weigh ye old options. Gotta think carefully about this. Now, while a lot of people played GoldenEye for their multiplayer fun, and to some extent I did, because if you owned a Nintendo 64 at one point or another, you played GoldenEye. That is not an if, but a when you have that N64, you played GoldenEye, period. And if you somehow own that console and you never played GoldenEye, then all I have to say to you is, why? No, really, why? Why would you deprive yourself of all that fun? That just sounds depressing. Like, not once? Not one game. Not one game with GoldenEye. Not one round? Nothing? Come on, you only live twice? That's such a fun mode. That's such a fun elimination type battle royal mode that you play with friends. Oh, man. Anyways, for me and my friends, the games that we played multiplayer on more than any other were wrestling games. We played those to hell. And the first one I was properly introduced to that was truly fun multiplayer, not Warzone, not Attitude, because even when I was a kid, I was like, ugh, those games just, no. It was WCW NWO Revenge. That was the first one I played where I was like, oh, wrestling games can be fun. This is awesome. This is fucking cool, man. However, the one game that truly got me into pro wrestling was WWF No Mercy, which seems to be the case with a lot of people out there, which is really cool. It's really cool how AKI were able to make these games and able to turn people into wrestling fans because they were just so fun and accessible. That is how you do it. Just pick up the controller and you're able to just instantly understand that what each button does. A grapple, B punt, B strikes. Hold A for strong grapple, hold B for strong strike. Keep building your momentum, go into special mode, strong grapple, tilt the control stick, hit your special move, go for the pin. 1, 2, 3, ding, ding, ding. Winner is you! I'm not sure what I'm doing there. But the point is, these games were simple to comprehend and able to get into, and I'm hoping that is the case for the upcoming All Elite Wrestling game. I would also like to note that WWF No Mercy also introduced me to my favorite wrestler of all time. I know some of you are going to think I'm joking, but I've said this multiple times throughout the decades. I am not joking, 100%, this is legit, my favorite wrestler of all time. Wait for it. Wait for it. Wait for it! Grandmaster Sexay, Brian Christopher! Yeah, he was my favorite wrestler back then because, as like a 10-year-old kid, Grandmaster Sexay, that's just a really cool name, man. Like, seriously, think about that. Grandmaster Sexay. That just sounds cool as fuck. And also when it comes to No Mercy, we would always screw each other over with guest referee matches. We'd be like, oh, don't worry, I'm Totes McGoat's going to call this right down the middle. And then when it came time to count the pinfall, 1, 2. Oh, kick out. Oh, you were so close. You were so close. And then when the CPU would pin them, 1, 2, 3. And just completely screw them over. Just, oh man, good times. Good times. They were all had. And when it comes to my dad renting games for me, I still remember one summer my dad renting for me WCW Backstage Assault, and because at the time I had very limited knowledge of WCW because of whatever WWE would show, and just like this is like 2003 at the time, and yes, even after WCW went out of business, they still had their games at Blockbuster to rent. So yeah, I spent like the summer of either 03 or 04 playing WCW Backstage Assault because there was just something I found addictive about it, and it was really, at the time, my only gateway into WCW's past. Yes, I had Revenge, and later on, games like Virtual Pro Wrestling 64, which I imported, and WCW vs. NWO World Tour, but, this is the only portal I had into that era of WCW, the sort of dying days, as it's often noted. So it was that and Mayhem, which I, for some reason, didn't even know existed because, we didn't have this catalog of games that we know now that we can just look up okay, here's all the games they had now. Back in the day, I wasn't using Wikipedia until 2007, I think. Really? So back in the early 2000s, we didn't really have a way to just look up, okay, here's every single type of game for every type of console. It was not nearly as comprehensive as we have it now. So, and the only reason I've discovered Mayhem is because my sister was babysitting someone. I went over to the house and I saw this game. I was like, WCW? I popped it in, WCW Mayhem, popped it in their N64, and I was like, oh my god, that's Masculus Rey Mysterio, that's Billy Kidman, that's Kenny Chaos, that's Wolfpack Sting, that's this, that's that, it's literally the only WCW game released on the N64 with full motion entrances and entrance music. Revenge was great, didn't have entrance music. Mayhem did have entrance music, but the controls were jank, and Backstage Assault, infinitely jankier, just, oh my god, Backstage Assault, oh my god. What are you doing? Why? Hey. On a happier note, the N64 also brought us the Zelda games. First Ocarina of Time, then Majora's Mask. Now, Ocarina of Time is an absolute classic. It is. I know a lot of people try to argue against that, saying that it's too flawed, it's too this, too that, too linear, but really, it's no more linear than A Link to the Past. Really, it isn't. It isn't. It isn't. Get over it. It really, really isn't. And now, the thing about Ocarina of Time versus A Link to the Past is that it is more narratively driven, whereas A Link to the Past is more gameplay driven, but both games basically have the same type of linearity to them, because are you really going to go out of order in the temples in A Link to the Past? Because I find that in most of the Let's Plays I've watched, they don't. Most people do play the dungeons relatively in order. And of course, in Ocarina of Time, there is technically a bit of non-linearity when it comes to the Spirit and Shadow Temples. You can technically play those two in any order. And I really don't think linearity is the end of the world. Like, for years and years and years, I've had to hear people say linearity bad, non-linearity good. But as we've learned in the past generation, with all these open world games going, oh, here's some non-linearity for you, whoa, boom! And now people are like, oh, when it's taken to this degree, it can be really, really bad. And when you play a game like, Skyward Sword or Uncharted, you find that linearity can be good. It's all about how you use it. And I feel like in Ocarina of Time, it's used really well, because the best way you can use linearity in an action-adventure title like this is every time you clear a dungeon, it opens up more of a world for you to explore. Or every time you go to a new area, there's just more stuff to do. And so, for example, when going through Ocarina of Time, you first you have to get your sword and shield, and getting those is an adventure in and of itself, because you have to find the sword yourself in the Kokiri Forest, and you have to find the money yourself to buy the Deku shield. Once you have that, you go to the Great Deku Tree, complete that dungeon, and that opens up Hyrule Field. You go to Hyrule Castle, you do a little bit of stealth inside the castle, and then that opens up a whole bunch of side quests. That ends up opening up the Happy Mask Salesman side quest, that ends up opening up the Gold Skulltula side quest, that opens up the ability to get 2 bottles, which back in the day with Zelda games, that was hugely important. That opens up like 3 different mini games. Like, there's a lot to do after you're done with the Hyrule Castle stealth section. Like, it's kind of amazing how much is opened up just from that alone. And you can actually get 3/4 of the Happy Mask Salesman side quest done right off the bat. You get 3/4 of it done. Although for some reason they saved the last 25% until you get the 3rd spiritual stone. I'm not sure what that's all about, but regardless, there's a lot that opens up there. Now, for someone who prefers a more open Zelda game, Majora's Mask might be more of your thing. Now, it's still relatively linear. You go from Woodfall to Snowhead to Great Bay to Ikana Canyon, but there's still a lot of exploration in there. In fact, one of the things you can do is you can get 3/4 of the main side quest done as soon as you turn back into a human. Which is kind of amazing, really, the fact that they let you get that far. And I'll also say that Majora's Mask has the number one best dungeon design I've ever played in a Zelda game outside of Snowhead Temple. That's the one where I always get lost in for a bit. Like, even more so than Stone Tower. Like, Stone Tower is relatively linear if you go through the rooms properly. So I only usually get lost there for about 2 to 3 minutes at a time. Whereas in Snowhead, I'm usually lost there for a good, 15, 20 minutes. Just something about the way Snowhead Temple is structured just usually leaves me up its lost. But Great Bay, I have not gone lost in once. In fact, about a year and a half ago, somewhere thereabouts, I played Great Bay Temple on a stream with people talking in my ear. So I had to deal with a chat, people in my Discord talking to me, and also focus on getting Great Bay Temple done. And I was able to do that easily. Easily was barely an effort, barely an inconvenience. And the fact that, I hear so many people say that's the worst dungeon ever, I'm like, what are you talking about? No, seriously, what are you talking about? Because I have played some dungeons, man. I played every 3D Zelda game, and I can tell you, Great Bay Temple, one of the most linear dungeons of all time. It's literally just it's mostly a straight line from beginning to end, with, near the ends needing to do a little bit of circling around to get the boss key, but aside from that, it's almost 100% a linear dungeon, and I think people kind of don't understand what you're supposed to do in Great Bay Temple. So here's the secret. Go from top to bottom, going through every single pathway, reverse the waterway once you get the ice arrow, reverse the direction, do that all over again, and then you get to the boss room, and then that's it, then you're done. I think the only reason why Great Bay Temple would ever cause anyone grief, really, is if you're trying to get all the stray fairies in that dungeon. If you're doing that, then yeah, it can be a really big headache, but I don't give a fuck about that, because once again, I don't give a fuck about completion. So I just go through the dungeon, get it done, go through the boss, beat it relatively easily. And the fact, once again, I'm not a Zelda master. I played every 3D Zelda, but I do not a master of the mechanics and the combat and all that stuff. In fact, I'm not even really a big fan of going through dungeons. I just go through dungeons just for the sake of getting it done and over with, so I can get to, the minigames, side quest, and story, which to me, those three things, that's what I play Zelda games for. Minigames, side quest, story. You have those three things for me? You do? Great, groovy, let's get on with that. I just get through the dungeons just for the sake of it, really, because usually in dungeons in video games, there's not a whole lot of plot that happens there. Thinking about it, the Fire Temple had a little bit of it in Ocarina of Time. Shadow Temple had some background elements along with the Spirit Temple, but for the most part, there's usually not a lot of plot or character development that happens in dungeons, and that just makes them drag for me. So when I say that the Great Bay Temple is a really easy linear temple, that should really tell you something, because to me, most dungeons are tedious, but Great Bay Temple, once again, not only did I beat this easily and with people in my ear and watching a chat room for about an hour. So I was able to just get in, whoop, in and out. And when it comes to that hour, I think that includes, let's see, what did I do? I think there was a bit of preparation beforehand and some bits afterwards where I did some mini games and whatnot. But overall, yeah, it was easily one of the shorter rides, and that even surprised me when I was done. I was like, oh, that was easy. That was way easier than I was expecting, considering everyone always complains about it, especially, when AVGN made his Majora's Mask video and he was complaining about that temple and not having enough time. Dude, this game gives you all the options to have all the time in the world. All I have to do is start the temple on day 1, 6 a.m., play the Song of Time in reverse, then boom, you got triple time. Now you got 3 hours to get through the temple. If you can't beat Great Bay Temple in 3 hours, that's not on the game, that's on you, man. Because once again, as someone who is not the best at these Zelda games, in fact, I consider myself average at best. I am average at best. Let me tell you, if you can't beat this temple in 3 hours, that is once again on you. But of course, this wouldn't be an N64 podcast featuring me without talking about one of my favorite franchises of all time, one of the franchises that for years and years and years I have been trying to get onto modern consoles. I don't care which console it gets on, just get these games on modern consoles for the sake of preserving them and maybe even igniting a brand new fan base. The Goemon games, Mystical Ninja starring Goemon and its sequel, Goemon's Great Adventure. Now these two games, while under the same franchise, are completely different in when it comes to mechanics and just almost everything. The tone and characters are the same, but gameplay, they couldn't be more different. Mystical Ninja starring Goemon is a 3D action-adventure game, and Goemon's Great Adventure is a 2D platformer collectathon. Yeah, you think the 3D platformer one would be the collectathon, but no, the 2D platformer one is, which is kind of interesting because I don't think that's done at the time. This Goemon's Great Adventure, it actually does a lot of things that you see nowadays in 2D platformers, but was not done very often at the time. Collectathon, number 1. Number 2, having town areas. Number 3, having side quests. Fucking side quests in an N64 game that's a 2D platformer. All that's just sounding really just out of nowhere, isn't it? Also, on top of that, multiple playable characters. You got Goemon, Ibisumaru, Yai, and Sasuke. You got 4 characters you can play as, all with different stats, reminiscent of Super Mario Bros. 2, although the only area where you can switch them are called tea houses, and you can only do that either in a town or on these like floating platforms that you find in regular levels. So outside of that, once you choose a character, you have to commit to that character. Now, the one thing I don't like about these Goemon games is that they have a life counter, which seems like a kind of thing that was just kept in N64 games because, well, they were in games of the past, so we just gotta keep up with that tradition. But I want people to play these games because they're so just absolutely filled with just whimsy, I guess one could say. Just weird Japanese whimsy. And there was also my introduction to Japanese culture, true Japanese culture. Yes, I would sometimes see Japanese stuff parodied on American television, like in Dexter's Lab when they did a Super Sentai parody, which is still one of the greatest episodes of anything that the fucking network has ever done. Because they did it with, loving the Sentai genre. But that was about my introduction to Japanese culture outside of these Goemon games. This just felt 100% unadulteratedly Japanese, which is not something, once again, that happened all the time back then. Back then, there was so much localization where it's like, nope, can't use that, can't use that, can't use that. These Americans won't get it, they won't get it, they won't get it. But somehow, Konami just decided, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just take a chance with these games. Let's just take a chance, throw these games out to the wild in the United States, and just see what happens. There was maybe a little bit of localization, but clearly localization was done purely for dialogue purposes and not for the sake of removing too much Japanese culture. Like, there might have been some, honorifics originally used, but if that was all that was removed, then really, I would not be surprised, because these games felt like they did not go through much localization when it comes to trying to Americanize these games, especially when compared to the Super Nintendo game, Legend of the Mystical Ninja, which, just from the little bit I've seen of that game, oh man, that's a lot of localization compared to what we got here with Mystical Ninja and Goemon's Great Adventure. They got away with a lot of stuff like, oh boy, just trust me, just play the games and you'll notice oh, they got away with that. And that, and how the fuck do they get... was localization just sleeping at the wheel of this game? And I would not be surprised if this is one of those really either low priority games that they barely paid attention to, or just one of the things where they're oh, they're probably not going to notice because nobody knows this game. Clearly this is not up high on the ye old radar where they were taking a microscope to every little thing. Alright, one thing we gotta talk about when it comes to the Nintendo 64 is the original Super Smash Bros. Something that I don't think any of us would imagine being this big, huge, top 5 franchise for Nintendo. And I don't think the creator would either, Mr. Sakurai, or as, of course, Nair Man, aka Ryan from Brain Scratch would say, Sakurai! Shakes fist. But yeah, man, that game it's amazing to think about how big it is today. Just think about humble beginnings, because seriously, go back and play it. It is very bare bones compared to the modern game, because it really was just okay, let's put this fighting game together and hope Nintendo likes it. And they didn't. It sold like gangbusters, and now everyone loves that. I still remember playing it back in the day, just thinking, wow, this game is fucking awesome. You get to play as Link, Mario, Luigi, Pikachu, and all these other characters that I discovered. This game was my introduction to Samus, Captain Falcon, and Ness. I had no idea who these characters were before this game, because I didn't own a Super Nintendo, so I had no idea what an Earthbound was. I had no idea what Metroid was, because once again, did not own a Super Nintendo, and there were no Metroid games on the Nintendo 64, and on top of that, I didn't really get into F-Zero until after this game was released, because none of my friends had it, because we played Mario Kart. And we didn't really see the need for another racing game because, well, we were kids, we did not know any better. So this game was my introduction to those franchises, and after seeing those characters, I'm like, oh, I want to try these games out. I eventually tried several Metroid games. I suck at all of them, really. Like, even to this day, I recently tried Metroid Fusion again, died at the first boss. Just went up to the first boss, I was doing well, and then the first boss was like, nope, dead. Well, fuck. Well, I tried. At the very least, I can say that I always tried. And when it comes to F-Zero, I absolutely love F-Zero X and especially GX, although I've never finished the story mode on that game because it is super difficult, but one day I will finish it. That is a guarantee. One day I'll finish the F-Zero GX story mode. In fact, I still have the game right over there. I'm pointing right at it. I am pointing at F-Zero GX for the Nintendo GameCube in my collection. I'm not sure why I am doing that, but I'm doing it for the sake of something. What? Once again, I don't know. And of course, when it comes to Earthbound, I wouldn't play that series until like 4 or 5 years ago. That would be, yeah, it was like 5, I think it actually was 5 years ago when it was whenever it was released on the Wii U. That was the first time I got to actually put proper time into Earthbound. I was like, oh, this is good. This is great. Why didn't this sell well? And then I looked at the marketing campaign. I'm like, oh, the marketing is why. God damn it. God damn it! And to this day, like everyone else, ever since I played Earthbound, I'm like, Mother 3, please. Can we get Mother 3? Can we get Mother 3? Mother 3! Mother 3! Mother 3! And I want the pressure on Nintendo so hard. Like, I think the only way we can get Mother 3 localized, like for Switch, is if we, like, 100%, like, we're going to need at least 40% of the entire Nintendo fan base to pretty much at the same time write physical letters, send it to Nintendo of America HQ, and just flood them with letters asking this game politely, might I add, politely to get localized, you know? No death threats, none of the domain stuff like, you better localize this or else. No, just politely ask, please localize Mother 3. If everyone were to do that like on the same day or same week, then I think that would be enough pressure for them to go, oh, these people really care. They might actually buy it. Let's do it. Like, that's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head that'll get us Mother 3. Going back onto the topic of Smash Bros, though, it really was just a fun, simple time because at the time there were no expectations to what a Smash Bros game was supposed to be because there was no Smash Bros game formula before that. It was just, okay, it's a fighting game featuring a whole bunch of Nintendo characters, and unlike every fighting game before it, it wasn't about getting their health bar to 0, it was about getting the percentage of damage done up to over 100% and trying to knock them off the battlefield, and not only that, but off the screen, because if they get knocked off the battlefield, they can still sort of fight their way back up and grab on. It was also kind of a mixture of platforming as well, which is not something that you see even to this day very often in fighting games. And for those wondering, my two mains on Smash Bros. 64 were Link and Fox McCloud. Those are the two that I mained the most. Now, when it comes to the N64 and RPGs, there were not a lot. There was Quest 64, which I have a lot of nostalgic memories for. Yeah, I know, a lot of people don't like it. Yes, it is basic. Yes, there isn't a lot to do, but at the same time, it is far from absolutely terrible and unplayable. It is fine. It is fine. It is okay. And quite honestly, I would not mind if that showed up on Nintendo's whole Switch gimmick. By the way, Nintendo, please get that fixed. Please, pretty please, get that Nintendo N64 emulation fixed. Please, I want to pay for it, but I just don't feel comfortable doing it right now with, number one, not enough games to really justify it, and number two, the performance seems to be less than perfect, which really should not be the case at this point. I mean, You've had the GameCube, Wii, and Wii U to practice N64 emulation on, and yet for free, there are fans that have made better emulators than you. That is disgraceful. Nevertheless, I would still love Quest 64 to be added to this lineup. Now, one game that is confirmed to be added to this lineup is the RPG on the N64 that I played the most, and it's probably the one that most of you play the most as well, and that is Paper Mario. I'm not sure what needs to be said about this than was already been said, but it is a super fun RPG featuring Mario, although unlike a lot of RPGs, when you defeat enemies and gain XP, you do not increase your damage, you do not increase your defense. However, you can increase your health, your mana, or your badge points, which is essentially what you use to give yourself equipment to do things like have special attacks that can do more damage, but that takes up flower points, which is this game's mana system. And there are things that where you can like trade around your health and flower points, although I'm not sure what the point of that is. I feel like that kind of defeats the point of leveling up, unless you want to do that for a specific battle, in which case that takes some tactics that kind of don't feel like thinking about too much. I don't like thinking too much in RPGs. I'm like, okay, what does the most damage? Okay, I pick that. Okay, let's go to enemy and bonk on the head. I win. That's basically how I play a lot of RPGs. I am a very simple person that just likes to do the highest damage possible and then just take them out as quickly as possible. One of the things that I will always appreciate Paper Mario 64 for is the fact that it really added, like, I guess I should say that it sort of created this universe for Mario, because before this, Mario enemies were just enemies. They're just that they're enemies with cool design, but they were just enemies. Paper Mario gave them life. It gave them character. It gave the Mushroom Kingdom a sense of living and being. And sure, you had a little bit of that in Mario RPG as well, but of course, I wouldn't really get into that until my adult years when it finally came out for the Nintendo Wii. But for years, like Paper Mario 64 and Thousand Year Door, those are the games I played where it felt like we were finally actually exploring the world that Mario lived in. Before this, it was just levels for the sake of levels. Now, those games are fun. Like Mario 64 was fun. It was awesome. Also 100% revolutionary, and there are about 1 million other people out there that can explain that way better than me. But for me, I always love diving into a game that feels like a living, breathing world. And Paper Mario was the first game to really do that for me in the world of Mario. And I don't think there's like any proper words really I can use to really convey that as much as I felt it at the time, because just playing through it, I'm like, oh my god, I'm actually going through this Mario world. And it's weird that this game, which feels way more 2D than Mario 64, but at the same time feels more alive in a weird way. It's just really strange, but that's just how I felt at the time. It's kind of how I feel now playing through it. And the first time this really clicked for me, for whatever reason, was the first time you get to Koopa Village. I don't know why it is, but when I get there, I was like, these aren't just Koopa Troopas, these are Koopas, and they have lives, they have houses, they have just normal existences, and it felt really fucking cool. I'm not sure what else to say other than that, because like I'm trying to properly convey this, but I don't think I'm doing a good job at it, but I'm hoping I am. I'm hoping you guys are understanding what I'm trying to say here, but like, imagine being like 10, 11 years old and first playing through that game with the only knowledge of Mario enemies being that they are just generic mooks that work for Bowser and are trying to stop you, and now here you are going through their village, and it's like, oh, there are ones that are just normal citizens. Well, that's fucking cool. And it's like that throughout the game as you go from town to town to town, from settlement to settlement, as you discover all these different races of Mario enemies that actually have their own lives to live. And that's one thing I always love about RPGs, is going to different towns, going to different locales and seeing how they differ from one another. And that's always why I hate it whenever a town is just generic town. That's all you go to. Generic town 1, generic town 2, generic town 3. They're all just towns with similar buildings. They don't have any, like, you don't see anything really different about them. Whereas you got Goomba Village, which is just this one Goomba family. Then you go to Koopa Village, which is this small town of Goombas. You also have Toad Town, which of course is filled with toads and is the most metropolitan area. And then after that, let's see, then you go to a Boo Manor, which is this giant mansion filled with boos. And after that, you go to this, let's see, I think after this, you go to the Tropical Island, which is Yoshi's Island. And you go to all these places which feel unique, and they all just, I love it. I love going to all these places where it actually feels like you're encountering different cultures, and the fact that they all exist within the Mario world, just, that's what I want to see more of. That's also why I really loved Mario Odyssey, because Mario Odyssey is the first 3D Mario game where I felt like I was on that type of adventure, going to different areas and different locales and seeing different cultures within the Mario world that I know exist because I played the Paper Mario games, but now I'm finally seeing it in the real 3D Mario, 3D platforming Mario games. Let's keep that up. Let's keep that up with more Mario games, you know? And with all that being said, we're now going to take a short break with more music and then come back with the mailbag, aka the people that added me on Twitter at TWK Official. Alright, after getting more water here, I am back into here to answer your tweets. Alright, first up we have at KNicholas_823. He says, off the top of my head, and don't laugh, playing 2-player in Versus in WCW vs NWO World Tour with my feet on the second controller. I'm not gonna laugh. In fact, here's the thing you should always know about me. I am not going to judge anyone for how they play video games, no matter what. That is not my style. That's not my thing. I am not going to judge. You play video games however you want to, Casey, and you know, that actually sounds like it could be kind of a challenge, you know? That should be something that somebody does at one of these video game conventions. Like, alright, try to put on a compelling wrestling match using one hand on one controller and your feet on the other. Somebody should legitimately do that. I want to see that now. Somebody go to like Too Many Games or something like that and just be like, hey, I got a challenge for you. Here's an N64. Here's WCW NWO Revenge or whatever. You know, there's tons of wrestling games you could use. And you just tell them, here's the game, use 2 controllers, use your hand for one, feet for the other, try to put on an entertaining match. So I would just love to see that. Casey, that was an excellent tweet. That just gave me the greatest idea. Thank you, sir. Next from at Enigma Extreme. He says, Rareware Library, first playing Ocarina of Time, and funny enough, losing all sense of time and discovering imports like Sin and Punishment. Now, yes, Sin and Punishment, that is available on Nintendo Switch now. Hopefully one day I'll get to check that out. But yeah, first let's take these in order. Rareware Library. Yeah, that's something I don't think I've dedicated enough time to here on Ye Old Podcast. You know, they had Jet Force Gemini, which is easily the most underrated game of all time. I've spent so many hours of Jet Force Gemini, and I think some of you might have as well. It's a super fun space third-person shooter, sci-fi, all that snazzy jazzy stuff. You have 3 playable characters to play as. First you have Juno. I'm trying to remember his twin sister's name. Vela, I think it is. And their dog, I think it's Lupo. Yeah, these names clearly not prototypical what you'd expect of video game protagonists, but at least, you know, they stand out relatively well. And yes, you play as a dog, and it is a third-person shooter, although there is the downside that there are also these civilian koala type things, and you have to save all of them to reach the end of the game. Yes, in order to reach the absolute end of the game, you have to rescue all of them, and enemies can kill them, and not only can enemies kill them, but they can be killed with friendly fire. So have fun going through that. And not only that, there's multiple pathways in each level, so this is a game while I've spent many, many hours on, I've never once finished because it requires me to be a completionist. And once again, as we have established time and time again, not my style. Next is Ocarina of Time. Already been through that over and over again. Excellent game. And then, of course, Sin and Punishment. Really hope to play that one day. So thank you, Enigma, for your tweets. Let's move on to the next one. Going once, going twice, and it looks like that's all all the feedback we got from you listeners. If you want to get any feedback in the future, remember, at TWK Official. And that's going to do it for the show. Once again, thank you to all my patrons over at patreon.com/TWKReviews. That's patreon.com/TWKReviews. Remember to like this video. Let me know a comment in the description down below what your favorite memories are of the Nintendo 64. Oh, my voice did a weird thing there. I'll see you all next time with more gaming goodness. Good night, everybody. Not sure why I did that, but guess that's just how we're going to end the show tonight. Bye-bye!